Hey everybody. Today we're answering the question, what equipment do I really need for a podcast? Not not only will we be talking about it, but we're going to try to provide some examples so you can hear and see if more money gets you better quality. And when I see questions asked online, like what mic or what camera should I use, I see a lot of people who they just respond and simply tell the poster what mic or camera they're using and how amazing they sound. With me being a curious person, I'll try to find their show to take a listen, to hear and see how good it is. And it's uncanny. Most of the people who talk about how amazing they sound, they usually don't. Their audio is usually somewhere between not so good to average. So, all of this is to say be cautious when taking advice from strangers online because we don't know what their experience level is. And we've talked about this before, but there's this idea that expensive equipment will make you sound better. And this comes from people listening to shows that sound good and learning what equipment they use, thinking that it's the equipment that makes it sound good. The truth is, these shows, they'd sound just as good using anything because they know what they're doing, they know how to use it, or they've hired people who know what they're doing to make everything sound as good as possible. And for those of you who are new to this stream, I'm Jesse. I'm a podcast editor, coach, and AI consultant. I also run Tansiaster Academy, where I help people take that next step in their editing journey. But I'm kind of rethinking how I might be able to retool that for the AI age, where more and more people are using text-based editing. But really, that's a story for another day. Joining me from the other side of the pond, as always, is Matthew Bliss, who I'm sure has a couple of things about himself that he'll tell you so you can get to know him.
Thanks, man. Yeah, Matt Bliss here, the owner and operator of mbpod.com, podcast editor, producer, coach, consultant, trying to pivot my business as well. Largely, I've been a producer and editor for the most part, but now I'm trying to get into something a little bit different, launch some podcasts for myself and start to share some of that knowledge that Jesse was talking about, the things that people put into practice, but others try to copy instead. I'd love to be able to teach people how to fish for themselves and decide what equipment is best for them or what workflow is best for them without having to look at the big game and the big dollar signs and just purchase what they think sounds good. So today is going to be a very interesting discussion, I think. Particularly as we'll probably try and speak to the people just getting started, like trying to select equipment, or people that have picked bad equipment and are trying to get new stuff. And I think we're going to test out some microphones and some other gear and swap and change and show you what it actually looks like in people whose environments, I guess, are ideal. And maybe that's a bit of a disclaimer that we should have as well, that Jesse and myself have probably done the best job that we can to try and make our rooms as quiet as possible, reducing that echo and that reverb, and that would be a lesson as well, that not everyone's environment is built the same. So if we're testing mics and they sound great, don't do what we do. Hear what we're saying. Do the research for yourself and find out which mic works best for you and your environment. But Jesse, where would you like to start with this discussion? As I can see, we're already going to be starting to play with a few things. We're also going to be juggling a lot of balls today, and I think Jesse's going to be juggling most of them because
Yeah, there's a lot of mics here. There's a lot of juggling to make sure we're not echoing. And thank you, House of Jen, for pointing that out. For anybody who's watching the replay, when I first started, I had echo, so we restarted. We'll be cutting that false start out afterwards. But yeah, we're going to be juggling through a bunch of things. But first, I have to figure out how to change up my camera. But while we're doing that, I think the big thing is people, they have this idea that if you spend more money, you get better quality. And that's usually true, but there's a lot of diminishing returns. And when you're talking about mics, that wall is very low. You can get a microphone that's going to get you more than good enough audio quality. And by that, I mean, it's not going to turn people away. It's going to sound just fine. No one is going to complain about the audio quality. And you can get that for about $50 US. I'm using a FiFine microphone that, in all honesty, they sent me to try out and to do a review. They're not paying me to use it. I've been using it for the last month or so to test it out. But I think it used to be in the $50 to $60 range. When I looked it up last week, I think it's up to $80. But it's not an expensive mic. But it sounds fine. No pun intended. There's no reason somebody can't get professional audio quality using this. Same thing with like an Audio-Technica ATR 2100 or a Samson Q2U. At Podfly, we sent 2100Xs to guests. They're all recording in untreated spaces. We got really good recordings with them. So, Matt, what's been your experience with using, from editing and your own personal experience using different mics?
Generally, from my experience, most of it was personal at the beginning, trying to refine that technique, but doing it with clients. Oftentimes, being able to recommend the ideal microphone for their purposes tends to be the starting point. And I think it's a really good way for us to whittle down how we think about things and how people watching this now should think about their microphones, is that you've got the lapel mic game. You've got the headset mic with the attached to a pair of headphones kind of setup. And you've got the XLR and USB mics that are a little bit different. And I've recommended USB mics for the most part to clients because they don't want to go through learning what XLR mics are like and how they work. They might sound, a little bit more detailed than the USB ones, but USB mics are coming quite a long way. But generally it's budget, I think, with a lot of people. I don't think it's very easy to sell them $1,000 worth of kit to just record 5 to 10 episodes of a podcast they're just trying out at the beginning. And what you're saying about a microphone, a cheaper microphone being just as good sometimes, that definitely feeds into that. And I found that there are, more often than not, headset mics or standalone microphones like the ones that we're using today that are fairly decent. For podcasting specifically, I'd say the lapel mics would have to be for a very specific circumstance. I don't think they work in every circumstance just because of the omnidirectional nature of them. But the selection at the beginning for clients is the important thing, and having experience across a broad range of them is really important too. So you'll notice that there's going to be a lot of waffling from me today because I always hesitate, for the reasons we've already talked about, recommending one thing or the other. It's the microphone thing is always an it depends kind of answer. It's figure out what's best for your circumstances and then make a recommendation based on that, or seek a recommendation based on that. And generally for me, it's either what is the position of your desk and how easily can you attach external microphones to it? Or are you going to be moving around a lot? Do you gesticulate a lot? In which case a headset mic is probably going to be the best way to go. The other side of it too is knowing how much you can repair in post-production if there are any issues as well. As much as we'll be talking about the gear for what goes into the podcast, and what we'll be testing today, if you happen to be with us live, is going to be what it is pre-recording, what it sounds like that way. But what you can do in post and know how to deal with is going to be important too. And the perfect example that comes to my mind is after recommending a Sennheiser headset mic to a couple of clients that record together. There was one time where one of them forgot to put the little foam cover on the omnidirectional mic. And I always I do this with them. I say, above your nose. I don't want to hear anything else. And it was above the nose. It was like off axis. It was doing all the right things. And yet every P picked up that plosive, no problem. So it's just, it's knowing as much as you can before you make that selection. I can see you panicking every time I stop talking. It's Jesse's turn to talk, and now he has to like dial a bunch of buttons on the control panel to make sure everything's going. Sorry, buddy. It's going to be rough this time around.
Not a problem. And here's a kind of a budget starter out setup. If I look and sound like this, chances are you're not going to last long. Because I've got a USB mic sitting on my desk. I'm using a really bad looking webcam. But if we bring the mic up closer to my mouth, now we're getting better sound quality. Because these come with a mic stand, little desk mount stand. But when you set it on the desk, it's not positioned right. So you want to get that mic up close to your mouth so it's not picking up as much of the room. That's how mics are designed. Dynamic mics get the best sound. If you get your mic set up right and you're using a dynamic mic, that's half the battle. That's more than half the battle. Because, like I said, this is an ATR 2100X. It's like a $50 USB XLR mic. It is connected via USB. That's all that there is. You don't need anything else. And this is going to be good enough for anybody. No one's going to complain about the audio quality. Let me change mics real quick.
Well, why don't I fill in for you and jump in on the notorious Blue Yeti, which I'm sure you can all hear is a little bit different. But this is probably what would be the converse case to the ATR 2100, where it's not a dynamic microphone. It's a condenser microphone, which means it's going to pick up a lot more detail in the environment. It means as I'm shuffling and playing with cables, you can probably hear that. But the funniest thing is that when you're hacking around with something like this, the same rules apply that Jesse was just talking about. The proximity to your mouth, where it sits and the angle, and the gain on the microphone too. All of those things together, those are important things to do to test when you're testing a new microphone, when you're bringing it in. And in any space, it's going to be super important for you to run through those things to be able to see if it is a mic that works best for you. And I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, that anyone who is unsure about their Blue Yeti at the moment is listening to this and going, man, that sounds really good. I wouldn't have thought that was a Blue Yeti. But on the other side of it, it could sound just as terrible. I can't monitor this one with where I am at the moment. So I'll wait for you in the comments to tell me if I'm kidding myself or if you're actually impressed.
it's fine. You can hear that there's a little bit more of that, the high end clarity. Clarity is not the right word. Condenser mics tend to be a little bit brighter. They have a higher frequency response than dynamics, so you could hear it when you switched between the two mics. But the big thing here is the Yeti, it's by no means a great mic, but it's not a terrible mic, provided you're using it in a space that's got acoustic treatment. That's the biggest key there. To my ears, it's still a very cheap sounding, harsh condenser mic, but most people are never going to hear that. And we've got a comment from House of Jen.
It's a very important comment as well.
And how can someone just starting out test different mics in their environment without buying a bunch of mics? There's two routes for this.
Jesse. Whichever one you want to.
Sorry, the way Ecamm works, it unmutes things when we change scenes sometimes, and that's really annoying. So thank you. So the question is, how can someone just starting out test different mics in their environment without buying a bunch of mics? There's two ways you can do this depending on where your budget is. If you're looking for sort of a higher end mic, you can usually find places that will rent those out to you so you can test them. But really, I think for most of us, find a place that has a really good return policy. And if it's the type of place you can call up and talk to somebody, call them and tell them what you're trying to do, that you just want to test out a few mics in your space, and let them know that. A lot of times they have mics they can send you as kind of loaners to test out. Some places don't, but that's where the return policy comes in. If you're not sure between 2 or 3 mics, yeah, you'll have to buy them. Either buy all 3, say you're considering 3 mics. Either buy all 3, keep the one you like, return the other 2. If that's not possible, maybe you start with 1 mic, you test it out. If you like it, you just keep it. So, unfortunately, it does require a bit of money to be able to do that. There's some music stores that might have a number of mics set up, but that's not going to give you the same experience as hearing it in your space. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the converse to this, like there is a question of buying a microphone and it being difficult to choose. Like in a vacuum, you need a microphone. You don't know which one will be best. So trying a few in your space is going to be one way to approach that. The other part of it is that you're also working in your space. But to come to the microphone purchasing stage, you shouldn't be treating every microphone in a vacuum. You should be thinking about what your vocal, environmental circumstances are. What's your computer setup? What kind of USB port availability do you have? Do you have an audio interface or not? These kind of questions can come into play. And I think when you're trying to figure out what your voice sounds like and what you can get out of that voice in post-production, I think any mic will do the job. And starting out cheap with a good recommended budget dynamic microphone and just playing around with it, that's the best way to find out. And then you can kind of narrow your choices a little bit. The other side of it is that there is tons of YouTube content out there of people testing microphones that you might be looking to purchase. And if you find someone with a similar vocal pattern, vocal resonance to yours, maybe even a similar environment, if you can swing that, then that's going to be a great way to get an imprint of what someone's experience is like. and be able to replicate that for yourself and minimize the number of microphones you want to test. Like, I don't think from the expensive end, you don't want someone getting a pod mic, an SM7B, and I don't even know what else. But the pod mic is like a higher frequency curve. Like, it's going to be crispier than an SM7B. And the SM7B is going to be more gain hungry than the pod mic. But what they do to your voice is going to be the important thing to note. So doing that and testing it on a budget mic, seeing what you can get out of it. And part of the reason I say this is because I started with a Blue Yeti myself. I started with it, half a meter away from my face and realizing, oh, that sounds terrible. Let's get that bad boy a little bit closer. Get it in front of your face. Those P's start getting really poppy. Get a pop filter, chuck it on top. All of a sudden, off axis is important. Get it under or to the side so you're pointing away. And all of these things are correlated with post-production techniques. Learning how to EQ your voice to optimize the best parts of your voice in whatever DAW you're using to be able to do it, whatever plugins you have available. I think the learning journey of understanding your voice, what a microphone can do, and practicing your skills to be able to change your voice to optimize it with whatever microphone you have is going to better inform your microphone choice down the line. And that's a longer journey, but I think it optimizes that a little bit, if only because there are some people that I've followed online and they have one of them is actually a therapist, which is funnily enough, she's restarted her podcast like 4 or 5 times at this point. And I was on a mastermind with her once. She admitted to her mic addiction. Like, she was like, I need to try this mic, and then I'll return it and get another one. And then I'll return that and get another one. But I don't think she's trying to optimize at this point. Every time she records a podcast, I'll see her on an SM7B, or I'll see her on a headset mic, or there'll be like 3 or 4 different microphones popping out. And in fairness, they all sound the same, probably because she's got her post-production thing optimized. So I think all of that stuff, like better informing yourself before you come to the microphone decision and understanding yourself enough to be able to inform that choice, I think that's a big part. And that'll save you a bit of budget on the other side. But whatever you're saving in budget, you're going to spend in time. It's always a trade-off,
It is. Let's see if I can switch scenes without echoing this time. Let's figure out where we need to be. There we go. And yeah, I did not mute. A couple of things that he touched on. With headset mics, you do have to be careful because so many of them are so cheap. They're so band limited that they don't necessarily sound too good. You have a lot of times they chop off like the top half of our voice, like from 10K on up, and that leaves things sounding really dark. And yeah, when I talk about mics for podcasters, I'm usually talking about standalone mics because I find that the vast majority of headset mics just don't sound good, whether they're gaming mics or the types that you see call center people using. You've got to spend a pretty good amount of money to get something that's going to sound pretty decent. And most people opt for the cheaper headsets. And he talked about lav microphones. I was hoping to be able to connect one up to showcase that as well. I ran out of time trying to figure out how to connect it in a way that's going to be seamless. I just ran out of time, so that's not going to be in the cards for today. But yeah,
Maybe I can cover the elephant in the room of the Bluetooth microphone, which should be coming through to you all right now. You would have seen me hurriedly shuffling over to my Nothing Open Ear headset, which I love for interviews to listen to. But as you can hear, the microphone isn't great. And that frequency limitation and like compression of signal that Jesse just talked about with the lav microphones as well, and the headset microphone, sorry, that is definitely the case with these. I think just to get it on the record for anyone who's looking for this advice, and maybe this is a great clip to explain it properly, why AirPods are definitely a no-go most of the time. It's because the microphone there has to be a bit of signal compression and smooshing to be able to get the signal into the computer over the air and then put it through another bunch of systems to be able to get it across the other side. And I actually accidentally used this microphone in a recording for an interview that will be releasing on Thursday. Halfway through, I managed to swap myself over to the proper microphone I intended to use, but no amount of post-production that I could do was going to fix the signal from this and make it match what was coming out of the RE320. Just, it could not happen. I did what I could, but it's very noticeable. So for anyone thinking about, oh, just chuck the AirPods in, it'll be fine, no worries. We've got this on the record now. Snip that, clip that, send it to the friend that keeps using their Bluetooth headset instead of a proper wired microphone. And hopefully that'll show them what's what. What do we got next, Jesse?
Yeah, there's no way to be able to make that match an actual microphone. So if you've got a guest using that and you've got a host using a decent setup, that mismatch between the two is not going to sound very good. But I'm going to show you the difference between 3 different cameras to get an idea of what the difference is, because we see people all the time, what camera should I use? Is it worth getting a mirrorless camera, or can we just use a webcam? So right now, let's go full screen for this to get the full picture. And that's the wrong one. Let's try this one. I don't know why the background's all messed up. Let's see if we can fix that.
Re-unmuted again as well. Make sure you pick your mic.
Thank you. Okay, so here I'm on a Canon mirrorless camera. This is a Canon R5C, but the quality is going to be the same for most of the Canon cameras. It'll be the same for Sony's or any other mirrorless camera. Now let's switch over to, let me find it.
You're currently muted everywhere.
Of course I am. So let me try that again. I'll have to put together a duplicate real quick. So give us just a second. Bear with us. When we're swapping things around, sometimes it takes a couple of minutes.
Yeah, but this is me, by the way, on my back-facing Google Pixel 7 camera, used as an Android webcam into just directly into Windows. It's got that function now, and it's I'm going to be honest, it's not lit the best. I could probably switch this off and it will make a slight. Oh no, that's awful. But yeah, this will probably show you that you know using the phone as a camera is okay. I think we're better equipped these days to use smartphones as cameras for our podcasts than we were before. And bear in mind that this is just directly into the computer as a webcam. It's not recording into your Riversides or your Descripts or whatever other recording platform you might be using, where it does its own onboard processing. This isn't necessarily going to be the most ideal signal that you'll get from a camera. But, you know, it's the fastest path to something that's halfway decent.
Exactly. And that's why it's really telling to show these types of examples. I've got things set up now, and again, this is me on the Canon. Let's go to the
You're muted again.
Thank you. Ecamm makes this a pain, so apologies for all of this. Live, like House of Jen said, it can be a real pain when live testing things for sure. Hang in there, Jesse, you got this. But here's the Lumina webcam, and what you'll notice is everything looks pretty sharp, but if you really look at the detail, you'll see it's really noisy, really pixelated, and if you compare the colors in the background, they're really saturated compared to this. This is a better reflection of the realistic colors, and you can see when we switch back to the other one, it's everything just seems overblown, oversaturated. And if we turn my lights off, you can start to really see where the quality falls apart. Because if we swap back to the main camera, well, I guess quality falls apart there too. So that's why lighting is important. Turn on the lighting, we've got that. If I turn the lighting up more, I start to get blown out. So being able to adjust the lighting to fit you is really important. And let's go to one last example. Get back to where I need to be.
Definitely
And
can't
here,
underestimate the lighting. It's huge.
And here we're using my iPhone. The colors are a little bit muted. I could probably adjust that a little bit in Ecamm to bring the colors out a little bit more. It seems like things are a little grayer than they should be, but you don't have that noise that you had on the webcam. Everything is much sharper and much more clear, and you don't get that weird cartoony effect that you got with the webcam. And I think some of that is from it just trying to make things look better. Like I look very red and not right. So I've seen people online rave about these Lumina webcams. From what I've seen, they're some of the worst webcams out there in terms of the 4K cameras. The Logitech Brio and Elgato Facecam look a lot better than this. So if you're looking for a webcam, stay away from the Lumina, but you can get pretty good quality out of a good quality webcam. I don't think there's necessarily any reason to spend money for a mirrorless unless you want to go to 4K or just have that really ultimate quality. When you go to mirrorless, you can start using lenses that give you that blurred background effect. I know some of the webcams, I think, are starting to be able to handle that. But you can get by just fine using an iPhone. You don't need to buy anything else. I'm not sure about the quality of cameras on other phones since I'm an Apple person. I've been using an iPhone forever. I know their cameras are really good. So Matt, what are your thoughts on those three types of cameras?
Well, I just have a clarifying question very quickly that might have affected the signal you were using from the iPhone. Were you using the Connect camera. I think it's called the Connect camera function, where it wirelessly connects to your MacBook with
No, this is plugged into the computer.
Okay, cool. Just checking, because I know that a lot of the recording companies are leaning on those features quite a lot to sell it as a feature of their product. Like, use your iPhone as a webcam, and make it super easy for yourself. But it's actually a function of another, company's device. And yeah, like it's almost a direct parallel with how you compare the microphones with the quality of the cameras that you choose. Like, I'd almost frame it as a cheap webcam, a high tier webcam, or the DSLR as the budget, intermediate, and high price tiers of microphones. And again, I think doing your research with the microphone selection that you're going to make is the super important part. Finding someone who's gone to the effort, like Jesse sometimes. I know you've done camera comparisons occasionally on your channel, perhaps, that actually does the side-by-side of the different cameras. And the reason I say this is because my Reddit feed was awash with ads about the OBSBot camera. And at the time I was thinking, I need to replace this Brio 4K. By the way, that's what I'm on right now, Brio 4K. Very good in an adequately lighted setup. I need to replace it. I want to look for another option so that I can get a secondary cam going, or try to improve what the camera setup is for me. And OBSBot says that they've got a 4K AI-driven camera that has signal cleanup, and it does all these automatic adjustment, rotating things to follow you around the room and all that kind of thing. And then I do my research, and someone compares all the 4 different models of OBSBot, and they all look terrible. And then there's too many comments and posts about people saying, my OBSBot the webcam turns off after 20 minutes. It turns out all of them have heating issues. You plug them in the normal operating circumstance, and if you want to use it for longer than 30 minutes, forget about it. It's just going to heat up and turn off. And some of those issues are things you need to consider too, especially as you start going higher and higher in the tiers. I'm sure, Jesse, you'd be able to talk to this much better than I could, but jumping straight into using a DSLR straight away is going to come with a whole host of problems, just like buying an SM7B as your first microphone. Because you have to think about, if it's a mirrorless that connects directly to the computer via a cable, are you going to get 4K down res to 1080 that way? Or are you just going to max out at 720p? But you want 1080, so how do you get that? Oh, you need to get a cam link or some sort of camera card that accepts a video signal that's then accepted by whatever recording platform you're going to use to take that video signal in as a potential, option as a webcam. And then you start using the DSLR, battery runs out, you think, I should just be able to plug it in. What else do I do? Get a battery replacement pack that plugs into power to be able to facilitate that. But that goes against the camera warranty, potentially, depending on the camera that you use. Like, there's a whole lot of variables, just like the SM7B. It's very gain hungry. So do you get a cloud lifter, or do you have to get a Rodecaster with the adequate gain to give it that boost to be able to use it appropriately? All of the considerations all come from research and a little bit of experience. Was I spot on there, Jesse, with the DSLR stuff?
Yeah.
Did you have to consider those things too?
It took me a while to find a Canon that would not overheat after 30 to 40 minutes in 4K. Most mirrorless cameras can run forever in 1080, but if you want 4K, Canon only has a couple of models that can run 4K without overheating. That's the R6 Mark II, and I think all of the R5 series. Anything lower than the R6 Mark II is going to overheat at probably 30 to 40 minutes. I was using an R8, and I could get about 40, maybe 45 minutes before it overheated. And again, that's in 4K. I know Sony, their cameras, they have a bunch of cameras that don't have the overheating. So I think that's why you see so many content creators using Sony's. But yeah, the other comment you brought up is connecting it to the computer. Usually, when you connect it straight through, yeah, you're limited to either 1080 or 720, something around there. So you're generally going to need a cam link or a video capture card that can handle 1080 or 4K. But one thing we need to talk about when it comes to video podcasts, video content in general, is your audio is more important than the video. The people who focus so much on the camera, thinking that we need the greatest camera, if your audio is good, people are more forgiving of imperfect stuff. Maybe that's a bit extreme. Let's see if I can turn it down a little bit. But if I was doing something where my audio or my videos like this, I'm obviously in shadows, people would still watch. Even if let's go over to one of the other cameras.
It's a really interesting... I don't think I've seen someone yet adequately prove, without just saying it, what you're trying to explain here. But yeah, people will hang around for better quality audio. People will switch off the audio faster than they'll switch off the video if it's bad quality.
So here I'm back on the noisy webcam, and here I've turned off the lights. So I just have an overhead light on. I'm using a really bad webcam. If I sound like this, people are still going to watch this. They're not going to turn it off. But if I'm talking like this, and let's go to my other camera.
Currently muted.
But if I've got this video, or the video quality is pretty good, but my audio sounds like this. It's quiet, it's distant. How long are you going to watch before you turn it off?
Yeah. And it's noticeable. It really is. It's more noticeable when you have a comparison, like if you do a side-by-side. There is a lot that the brain can forgive, but like if you see someone on TV broadcast quality video and they sound like they're talking into a microwave, then they just won't hang around for it. They just won't.
So if you compare me right now to Matt talking as he takes a sip of water.
Sorry. I'm talking.
Which one of us are you going to pay more attention to? Who sounds smarter, more intelligent, more professional in this given instant?
And I, thusly, do proclaim that I am the more intelligent of the two. Because my mic sounds great. And I use big words. And you're muted. You're still muted. Uh-oh.
Okay. Am I back now?
Yes, you're back.
I don't know how that got muted. Oh well. But audio quality is everything when it comes to video. People are more forgiving of imperfection when the video isn't quite up to par. So make sure you've got the audio quality good. Jen says, for me, it's more a matter of how much I have to strain my ears to make out what is being said. And that is definitely part of it. If granted, a live stream is going to be a little bit different because we're doing it all live, but when you're talking about a produced show, that there's a difference between you can hear when the mic is far away versus up close. And if you're not getting your audio quality, your audio loudness in line with other channels, and you switch to a video and it's really quiet, a lot of people aren't going to want to turn it up. They're just going to switch it off. That's why loudness management is pretty important. But when it comes to YouTube, I see a lot of people talk about YouTube's standard of -14 LUFS, and that's really more for music and production stuff. Dialogue does not sound good that loud. If you really pay attention to most of the well put together YouTube videos, they're usually closer to -20, -21 LUFS, because most of the people, they're not using loudness meters. They're not audio people. They're just following traditional guidelines, and that puts you around -20 to -21, 23 LUFS. To me, that's really actually the sweet spot for dialogue, because we're not having to crank up gain and use limiters to try to get it louder than it naturally is.
Yeah, I think the number gets thrown around a lot is -23. And some people in podcasting forums kind of argue about that a little bit. But yeah.
So we've played around with cameras. Let's talk about audio stuff for a little bit.
Sure.
When it comes to podcasting, we have, 3 different types of shows. Solo shows, shows where you're doing remote interviews with people, or you have remote co-hosts, and then you have in-person shows. The first two, your needs are the same. If you're doing a solo show or you're doing remote interviews, the most basic thing you need is a microphone. A USB microphone is all that you need. I realize I don't even have my MV7 out. I'd meant to have that, but oh well. Too many mics, not enough time. But for anybody, if you're not recording in person, you absolutely do not need an audio interface. You do not need a Rodecaster. They might be fun to have, but they're not a necessity. They're not going to make you sound any better. So that's one of the first things I want to get through. If you're recording by yourself, there's no one else in the room with you, whether you're doing remote interviews or just a solo show. A simple USB mic, that's all you need. And I'm a big advocate of keeping your setup as simple as possible. As you've seen during this live stream, the more complexity you add to it, the more there is to troubleshoot and try to figure out when something's not going right. With a USB mic, you have the mic, you have a cable, and you've got your device, your computer, whatever you're plugged into. Keep it simple.
And there'll always
Something
be people
goes
out
bad.
there that have an opinion about whether XLR versus USB sounds better or not. But I think USB's come a long way in the last while.
But the thing is, it's not about how things are connected. The cable has nothing to do with it. It's about the preamps. You're either using the preamp in an audio interface or a Rodecaster, and that's if you're using an XLR mic, or if you're using USB, it's the preamp that is built into the microphone. The preamp and the audio to digital conversion. Those are the two main components. And these days, the built-in converters and preamps, you're not going to hear much difference between if I were to plug in this FiFine both via USB and XLR, most people would not hear any noticeable difference. If there's any difference, it would be because there's some kind of processing turned on through the USB, or through the, either the USB or through the XLR.
Yeah.
So I've done videos, a couple of videos. I know I've done it with the MV7. I think I've done it with the ATR 2100X. I might have even done it with the Samson Q9U too, where I cut back and forth between the USB and the XLR, and you can't hear a difference. I've done tests where we have a bunch of clips asking people to identify, is this clip an XLR mic or is it a USB? Some people got most of them right. Nobody got all of them right. And every single person identified a mic as the same clip as being an XLR mic. It was a Samson Q2U. I mean, all you need to know,
There you go.
your listeners, they're not going to hear a difference between the two. Chances are you yourself won't hear a difference. So that's an argument that we need to just put to bed. One does not sound better or worse than the other. So just accept that and move on. If you're doing something in person, that's when things really change, because now you have multiple microphones. You really can't use USB mics. I know Zoom just came out with the P2, which allows you to connect two USB microphones, but that only helps you if you're just recording two people. A lot of times it seems like most in-person, multi-person podcasts that aren't being produced by big companies are usually more than two people sitting around a table. So once you add that level, now you need something like a podcast mixer, an audio interface, or a portable recorder. You need something that can take all of your mics and record it or send those individual signals into the computer. And that's where you start getting into the more expensive side of things. But a Rodecaster is not going to make things sound better than using an audio interface. It's not going to make you sound better than using a USB mic.
Yeah. And it's the interesting thing for people to think about, and it'll be interesting to hear what your thoughts are about it too, is that recording in person, the equipment connections all happen where the mics go into the devices that you choose. The environment and positioning is important as well. If you've got your mic bleed happening because you're sitting too close, you may need to sit a little bit. That's a microphone agnostic kind of thing. The other thing about sometimes recording with headphones is ideal, or sometimes not. If you're going to gain down the microphones enough that you can reject the background noise, then maybe you don't need them. What are your thoughts on getting the optimum in-person positioning experience?
There's no way around mic bleed. That's the first thing anybody recording in person needs to understand. There's no positioning the mic so that you don't get it. A microphone, they're dumb devices. They can't figure out the difference between you and the person sitting on the other side of the room. Think of them like your ears. If you can hear the sound, your microphone's going to hear it too. The person across the room, they're going to be quieter in the microphone than you are. But it's still going to pick them up. You can do a lot of things in post to clean that up, but the big thing is everybody needs to be aware of mic bleed, because as soon as two people talk at the same time, it's not like a remote interview where you can just separate that and nobody knows that there was crosstalk. If you try doing that with in-person audio, you're going to hear the ghost over talk from the other person on the main person's track. So it just sounds weird if you try to separate stuff, because you get that ghosting, and that just doesn't sound good. So you're more or less stuck with things with that over talk, crosstalk type thing when it happens. You've on location in-person type recording, it's going to be a bit of a compromise because of that. You're not going to have the same flexibility that you do when it's remote. That's just the nature of the beast. You can set people so they're facing each other and set the microphone so they're facing, the back of the microphone is facing the other person, so they're in the place that has the least sensitivity, kind of called the null spot, but you're still going to pick up some of that sound. There's no such thing. Okay, we're starting to see technology which actually does kind of reject sound, but it's not really the best technology to use. But in general terms, there's no such thing as a noise blocking, sound rejecting microphone. Even if you see marketing copy that says that, generally that more or less means it's a dynamic mic, which is less sensitive. So it's not going to pick up as much noise as something like a Blue Yeti or a condenser. That's my take on in-person stuff. It's a different thing, and you have to go into it knowing you might have to make some compromises.
Yep. And for me, I've edited for people and myself, both in person and remote. And I think learning the tricks for both is important. Just like being remote, the production tricks that you use to optimize the signal for both people, those tips aren't going to transfer across to the in-person. But the in-person has its own advantages. Like if you're recording in an interface with two microphones, the thing that you can guarantee is that no syncing will be required, presuming the technology works okay. So that means that when someone is talking in one microphone, when they hear it in the other microphone, they're going to be happening at the same time. So as long as the other person being present while the other mic is recording, you may not hear the bleed because you'll be hearing the actual signal from the other microphone. And that's when optimizing the gain or however you use gating during the editing is going to have a significant impact on what kind of signal you get out of it. But as you said, the reality of the situation for in-person is it's like having ears in the room. It's going to hear everything. You can't avoid it. As much as dynamics reject it more than condensers, there's no one-touch solution yet about avoiding that bleed entirely.
And that's a good point about the bleed when it comes to everything's in line with each other. So when people talk at the same time, you're not going to notice a whole lot, but when people get louder, you're going to hear that. You're going to hear it in the form of a little more reverb on things, because you're getting the sound from two different mics in different locations. You're going to pick up more of the room sound. It's doubling up the imperfections in that space. You're going to be picking up twice the noise if it's two mics. If you're recording 4 people, that is going to really magnify all of the noise, all of the acoustic imperfections. So it becomes even more critical that you're cutting out all of the dead air, so you don't get all of that noise, and you don't want 4 tracks of people drinking water and sniffing and all of the things that happen when they're not talking. So just clean that up, cut it out. It results in a better sounding product, a better sounding podcast, a better experience for your audience.
Yep, yep. And the other thing that you can't ignore is environment. If you're doing it in person and you want to optimize all of the things that you possibly can, doing a bit of research on how reverb or how sound reverberates in a room and how it can be absorbed properly is going to benefit you quite a lot as well. So gear selection, super important, but where you position yourself in the room is also super important. There have been times where I can tell from a recording I've gotten from a client when one of them has their back to a wall and the other is facing that wall, because I can hear the other person almost directly just as it bounces straight off that hard wall right into the other person's microphone straight away. So yeah.
So let's do a couple other mic comparisons. So right now I'm on the FiFine. Let me mute that and we'll go to Samson Q9. So here's the Samson Q9U, and it looks like I'm coming
Ooh,
through
that's
really quiet.
I don't want to interrupt you, Jesse, but that's incredibly quiet.
Yeah, I just saw that.
I'm not sure if it should be that quiet. There was a little bit of buzz too.
That was probably me bumping the... Let me
Still very quiet.
investigate that a little bit.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I think if you've got too many USB devices connected, it may benefit you unplugging some of them, just to make sure that the power distribution isn't being spread so thinly across all of your devices that it's not giving enough signal to the microphone to be able to give you enough. Presuming that's a USB one. Is it a USB?
Yeah, it's USB, but it's in a powered dock, so power isn't an issue. This is more just a setting issue.
Okay.
So give me a second as I try to find where we adjust the sound.
I'll just very quickly explain to someone listening who might say, "What are you, an idiot? Like, USB ports are USB ports." There's a really interesting detail of how computers work and how power and availability is distributed across a motherboard for some computers, where just because you have a port doesn't mean that port is available 100% of the time for all things if there are certain power requirements required of those devices. One of the big things is internal graphics cards for computers, and I'm going to lose people at this point. I know I am, but in case you're interested, internal graphics cards will occupy essentially USB lanes that are allocated as buses that connect to USB ports on the motherboard. And if you choose to put certain graphics cards in certain PCI Express slots on your motherboard, it reduces the availability of certain USB bus lanes to enable certain high-powered devices or high-stream data devices and make them available if you're using both. And this is often the case with USB, and you'll notice this when you have plugged-in USB docks. Jesse said he's got a powered one there. Very important thing, because if you've got a USB dock powered by the USB signal alone, then it's spreading that power, it's dividing that power across all the ports you have available there. So if you've got a 60-watt USB dock plugged into your computer and you plug 4 60-watt powered devices into that USB dock, you're not going to get the kind of performance that you'd expect. How are you going, Jesse, with the mic?
I boosted the gain, but I think it's more an issue of I have a quiet voice. So when using a lot of mics, it's very challenging.
Yeah, there's a lot of line noise there. I can tell that you've really boosted that signal a bit. Is that microphone uh, generally pretty quiet, or would it have a little bit more gain to it usually?
That I don't know. You're asking the wrong person because I have an incredibly quiet voice. So
Yeah.
I struggle with the SM7B because I need
Mm.
so much gain. I end up getting noise as a result. It doesn't matter. And I try to avoid any kind of cleanup just because trying to reduce noise, it does compromise the audio.
Yeah. It's a tough line, but that's understanding your voice. I think that's a
That
really
is.
important thing. That's one of the things that we're talking about.
And House of Jen, that was insane. Even with my good cans, I could barely hear it. Yeah, that's just me. I really do have a quiet voice. It's it's the way I am. I'm not a loud person. I don't know how people can be loud. It doesn't compute in my brain. But I've got one more mic. Yeah, one more that's out. So right now I'm in the FiFine. This is the K688. And now I'm on the Shure SM7B. I'm not sure how much noise you're hearing, but I worked with Matt beforehand to make sure the gain was similar to the FiFine. So we've got this pretty much cranked up to the max. I think I had it at about 70 dB of gain. Let me check. Oh, actually, I'm only at 60 dB, but then I've got almost probably 10 dB boost at the mixer level itself. So we're probably at about 70 dB of gain. So if I'm using a cheap interface that has 60 dB of gain, I'm still going to struggle. I'm going to have to add a boost in post just to get it up to a workable volume. All of that gain is going to result in more noise, so I'm going to have to do more to clean up the audio. And that's why, even though I'm fine with the sound of the SM7B, it introduces more work on my end. And that's why I generally use the Earthworks Ethos. It's a condenser mic, and since my room has acoustic treatment, I can get away with using that. I think it's got that broadcast sound like a lot of dynamics have, like the SM7B, like I guess the RE20 is a broadcast mic, but to me that one actually sounds a lot more like a condenser. It's got it's got more frequency, a higher frequency response. Something about it just feels more like a condenser than a dynamic. And we've got the Ethos, which is a condenser, but it feels more like a dynamic broadcast mic in the way that it sounds. So that's why the Ethos is my preferred mic. And once I actually find the time to actually record the review for the K688, it's going to go away into a box, probably never to be seen again unless I bring it out for some kind of a test. It's not a bad mic, but it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. It feels like a toy when you take it out of the box. It weighs almost nothing. Every other mic that I have has a little bit of weight to it. I'm actually surprised I didn't need to use the counterweight on my mic arm. It's so light.
But it's really funny that you've ended up bringing these two next to each other, because for what it lacks in build quality, when you switched between the FiFine and the SM7B, to my ear, and I'm assuming I'm as close to the signal as you could possibly get, for someone who would be listening in. There wasn't an appreciable difference between the two. I think they've done a pretty good job to get a budget version of the SM7B and have a very similar, you know, whatever, like you might be adding extra things to it from the Mackie side, but you know, to me, I think if someone wanted to try an SM7B and got the FiFine mic you've got now, I think that would be an adequate test.
The only thing I have going on in the Mackie is on the FiFine. I've got the DSLR on, and I've got EQ. Just a little bit of subtle EQ.
Okay.
Let me take a look at it.
Comparing the two now, I can tell that there's probably a little bit more high end in the FiFine. But
no, we're still on the 7B.
Oh, you're still at the 7. So here you go. You can't even tell I'm picking out problems with it and it's not even shifted.
Okay, so
but even
I've got
the build is kind of the same too. They've gone for a similar shape.
Yeah, they do. I've got, I guess, a very slight boost around 200 hertz. It's got to be about 1.5 dB. I've got a mid cut around 700, and that's the only EQ I have going on the FiFine. The SM7B, it's completely raw right now.
All right. So you had to add a bit of mud to it.
Well, I always always EQ the mic, and I mean, really, the EQ curve is what I use for the Ethos. I just never changed it.
Oh, okay.
I know I have a lot of mud in the 700 range, so I always cut that out. I'm not sure why I ended up with the slight boost where I did. I don't remember doing that, but apparently I did. So here's, again, we're on the 7B. Now we're back on the FiFine. So I'm not sure how much of a difference you're hearing in my ears.
A little bit.
Yeah, I could hear it, I guess, being a little bit brighter than this one. Okay, Jen is asking...
She wants to dive in.
What's the settings on the 7B itself? Helps if I look at it right side up. I have the, whatever they call it, the high-end boost on, but the other one is off. Not sure if you can see that. Come on, focus. So that's the settings I've got. And the FiFine has it doesn't have any settings like that. The only things you have are the gain and headphone volume, I believe.
Yeah, that's what it looks like from here.
That's all that's on there. So yeah, there's not a lot to set on the FiFine.
There you go.
So yeah, that's what I've had to show today, and I think it really, actually, we never did. Where did my USB cable go? Oh, I guess we did do a clip of the 2100X that was properly positioned.
So what are we doing now?
I'm trying to move to the 2100X, which does not seem to be showing up. Or I'm not seeing it because I have 1800 different devices that show up. There we go.
I'm seeing a very disrupted signal on my side from our behind the scenes preview of your stuff. But anyway, keep going. Let's see.
Okay, so here's the ATR 2100X. Again, a $50 to $60 mic. Actually, let's compare this to the SM7B, which is a little bit of a juggling.
Yeah. How many hands have you got? You need an assistant.
Okay, so we've got the ATR 2100X, which is a $50 microphone. Somehow it's become cheaper than the Samson Q2U. I'm guessing they just wanted to pick a fight with Samson to have the cheapest mic. But here's the 2100X. Yeah. Sorry for all the and here's the SM7B. I'm not sure how much of a difference you're hearing between the two, but are we hearing a $300+ difference between the two mics? Especially since they're both raw right now. I'm going to guess we can make either one work. And I see you shaking your head. Is that an affirmative, or are you disagreeing?
I'm going to be honest, I prefer the Samson, the other ATR, sorry, that you got in your hands right now.
Do you?
It's just a little bit easier on my ears, I think. But listen, this is probably a very good time to talk about ear fatigue. Like the idea that you can edit things in circles and listen to comparisons in circles and come up with different answers every time you listen to the same comparison, that it's a hole that you can dive down quite deeply, which is probably what the person I referred to earlier that I mentioned that gets a new microphone every time she records something new. That comparison is the thief of joy in that case, and it's the thief of money from your wallet. So for me, I said the FiFine sounded great compared to the SM7B, and then you said it was the SM7B, but now I'm listening to the ATR and saying it's better than the SM7B. But, you know, we've been listening to different microphones for an hour and a half, and I've got particular headphones, and I hear the signal a particular way through the interface, the digital one that we've got flying across the internet halfway across the world. There's all those biases that you need to keep in mind, but ear fatigue is a big one. Sometimes you just can't trust yourself. So different testing environments for different things.
Yeah, hearing fatigue is a really big thing. Our ears start to become less sensitive the longer we're listening to something critically. So what we've been doing, having been listening to each other for an hour and a half, yeah, our ears are not going to be as good at hearing the differences as they would be if we just started. And Jen said, more lows in the 7B for me, but it's workable. And that's really what it's about. All of these mics are workable. And your audience, they're not going to hear a side-by-side thing. There are very few, if many, people out there who can listen to something that's been well recorded and produced and say, that's an SM7B. That's an Audio-Technica ATR 2100X. Most people, they don't have the ears for that, and once it's EQ'd, all bets are off. So really, the microphone, it has a very small role in your overall audio quality. It's more important that you pick the right type of mic for your space, which for the vast majority of people is going to be a dynamic mic. If you're someone like me with a quiet voice, something that requires a ton of gain like the SM7B, that's probably not a good choice for you. So these are the types of things we need to be aware of. Like we said, with the SM7B, I had the gain set at probably about 70 dB. With the FiFine, I'm at, okay, that's my headphone gain. Let's see. I'm at 57 dB on the FiFine. So that's a 13 dB difference, which means I'm going to be getting a cleaner signal. Preamps, they get noisier as we get closer to their maximum, 100%. Usually, once you hit about 75%, that's where you start running into that noise. And I think the Mackie DLZ has 70 to 75 dB of gain. So pushing it to 70, there's definitely going to be a little bit of noise there. And when I monitor, I'm probably not going to hear anything because I monitor so quietly. A lot of people listen a lot more loudly than I do, so they're probably going to hear more of that noise floor if I don't do any kind of gating or noise reduction, which I prefer not to do on my videos. I'm lazy. That's one of the reasons. And also, it does compromise the video or the audio quality. I've cleaned up audio, and sometimes you just get this phasing sound. It becomes a little more hollow. And that's when I'm doing very light noise reduction. So I've just found it's not worth going down that road. I'll just clean up my signal so I don't need to use it.
Yeah, I've caught myself in that trap as well. And I find when I edit my own audio that doing as little as possible to my signal is always the better option. You just hear it, but yourself. Like there's something that happens to it through the post-production process you do for everyone else that is just a little bit different. But the two things that I wanted to mention based on what you just said is, first of all, that having an objective ear is sometimes really handy. It's really useful to have people that you know that can listen to the signal and give you advice. And knowing that this is an advice that I've acted on before, only because I haven't done too much podcasting myself for a while, being able to get that objective ear to it and have people who know what they're doing recommend what you should do or what sounds better than the other, and getting that, appropriately recorded to make those recommendations is important. The other side is just to go over again what you said. The listener is the most important part if you're doing podcasting particularly, and they have no comparison. Like, you create the signal that they're going to listen to, you optimize it as much as you can, but you being in the middle of that process, you've heard it when it's raw, you've potentially been there when it's been recorded, and you've heard it after you've done the post-production. So you've heard it potentially 3 different times over, and you're comparing it across the 3. But the listener only hears once, and they only hear what you give them. They don't compare to what the raw original signal is. And I don't think I've heard a listener to a podcaster, meet someone in person and go, "Oh, you sound awful," or "You sound different on your podcast. I'm just going to stop listening because it's not genuine." Doesn't happen. So this is more of it should relax you as an editor, or when you're editing your own stuff, that what you give them is what they're going to hear. So optimizing that as much as you can and having that feed into your equipment selection and your mic selection and your post-production process is going to be the biggest thing. Don't get stuck in the comparison loop between raw and produced. It's a nebulous.
Exactly. It's really easy to get caught in that A/B testing and comparison, and there really isn't. You're never going to find perfection. And I think one of the best examples I can give is, no matter what mic you're using, you're still going to sound like you. If you don't believe me, I mean, the biggest differences they're usually subtle, and you can get the same sort of differences just with EQ use. And a really good example of that, go watch a bunch of podcastage mic reviews. Most people, there's going to be some mics that are really night and day difference, but a lot of the time, you're not going to hear that. You're just going to hear very subtle differences. This mic might have a little more low end, it might have a little more high end, it might sound a little more muffled. Some mics will sound more expensive, other mics will sound cheap, but through it all, he still sounds like himself through all of the mics. That's the first thing we need to really accept. a different mic isn't going to make us sound like an entirely different person. We might find a mic that flatters our voice, and that's ideally what we're going for. But like we talked about earlier, if you don't have a budget to go try out a ton of different mics, it's going to be a challenge to find the one that's going to fit your voice the best. So a lot of times we have trial and error, and really with podcasting, you have maybe a dozen different choices for decent USB or XLR microphones that are under $500.
Definitely.
And talking about the ear fatigue, we've got a comment or a question on ear fatigue. Roughly how often when editing or critical listening should one take a break? How long should the break be? And if I'm editing, my goal is to take a break every hour. I'll edit for 50 minutes, 55 minutes if I'm really pushing it. I want to take at least a 5-minute break. Get up, go get some water, walk around the house, get some movement, come back, and you should be fine. If I'm doing something really critical like EQ work, that comes down to like 10, 15 minutes before I have to take a break. I made the mistake in my course of trying to go through and do an hour-long tutorial on EQ work, and by the end of it, I honestly could not hear what I was doing. And I think I probably commented on that. I know what I'm doing, but I lost that objectivity to really be able to hear the changes that I'm making, because EQ work is usually a very subtle thing, and you stop being able to hear those 1 or 2 dB boosts or cuts. So the answer, as always, is it depends. If you're editing and you're just listening for disfluencies in speech, that's a lot less of an issue because it's not super critical. We need to give our ears a break from the constant sound in the headphones. That's why I get up and take a break every hour. It helps me reset and I don't burn my ears out. And I mean, there's times where I'll wake up, I'll start editing, and my hearing is just off. Everything sounds wrong to me. And hopefully I don't have to edit that day, and then I'll be fine the next day. Don't know what happens, but things like that do happen, where we wake up and something's going on and things just aren't sounding right. On those types of days, I can edit, but I definitely can't EQ or compress because I'm just not hearing things right. And there's no break that's going to solve that other than waiting until my ears fix themselves.
Yeah, I think it's less of an it depends question. I think it's understanding your baseline. When you do enough of the work, like you said, you know when it sounds weird, when it sounds off. And this is probably one of the best reasons for a podcast editor to have not as many clients if it's possible. Because if you're doing client work across the day, 4 or 5 different people, that's 4 or 5 different pivots across different signals with different equipment, processing in different ways. And that's when you hit that fatigue wall pretty hard. And I know I've had times where I've done the signal processing, ready for an edit the following day, and I'll listen to it the following day, and I'm like, oh God, how did I miss that? Reprocess the signal. Let's fix that up. And it's just, it's a psychological thing, I think, more so than like, doing a Pomodoro kind of setup to reset your ears. It's understanding what the fatigue is, compartmentalizing it where you can, but having a way to check against yourself to know, is this bad for me at the moment? Do I need to take a break? And then perhaps that then leading to you knowing just you mix for 3 hours and you should take a prophylactic break. just to avoid it in the first instance, but it's ear sensitivity is one of those things that's just difficult to monitor. I think as long as you have a baseline for yourself, you're good.
And I think we'll close with that, tying in with what you just said. I think I've got a rule. I never go back the next day and listen to what I've done, because we're going to hear things differently every time we go into a project. I'll listen back to maybe a couple of episodes a couple of times a year, like months after I've done them, just to kind of QC the work, see if there's anything I'm missing, because I'm going to be biased right after I do something. But yeah, you're always going to hear things like, oh, I should have done that, I should have done this. But if we start questioning everything we do all the time, we're going to start going down that rabbit hole of trying to chase perfection, and that just doesn't exist. So that's why I do my mix first, clean everything up, get it mixed, so I've got everything at my -16 LUFS as I edit, so I'm hearing the finalized version as I go. So I'm only focused on the editing. When I'm done, I'm done. I verify that the audio's there, it hits my loudness standard, but I'm not going to go back and re-listen to it to see if I missed anything, because without a doubt, there's things that while editing in real time, I made a judgment call that, okay, I don't need to cut that out. Tomorrow, or 6 months down the road, I'm listening to this not as an editor, but as a listener, and I have a different perspective and go, okay, I could have probably cut that out, but also at the same time, is that really going to make anybody stop listening? Probably not. So it's not worth losing any sleep over. So my advice is, when you're done, you're done, and move forward.
Yes. Sorry, the signal cut out there for me. That's probably a good opportunity for us to end the stream, though, unless all of the microphones you have connected to your computer explode and I lose you completely.
Let's hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, I think this is a good place to end it. Thank you, House of Jen, and the other people out there watching. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. House of Jen says, thanks, y'all. Always a pleasure. And we'll see you next week, where we'll talk about something else.
See you then, guys.
Bye.